Thank you. So when was the last time you took a risk? Not a frivolous one, not a silly one, not cutting your own bangs or making an entree for the first time on a day you're having a dinner party. I'm talking about risk that has serious import and consequences, that requires the proverbial pros and cons list, one that takes thought and one that you pray about. We live in a world that often rewards and promotes comfort and stability. But our greatest growth comes from the moments when we step out of that comfort zone into the unknown. So how do we know when to do this? How do we know when to take these risks? And why do we take them? Our Jesuit education prepares us and even requires us to take them. Because Jesuit values don't live inside a classroom. They take root in real choices, choices that involve risk and vulnerability. And these Jesuit values give you the space to ask if you are being called to do and to be more. I graduated from Holy Cross in 1989 as an English major, and if there had been memes back then, I would have been part of the classic one about English majors trying to find jobs. Or fill in the blank, whatever liberal arts major is seemingly not preparing you for a profession. The next meme would have been a picture of me standing in front of a classroom, and it would have been spot on. After Holy Cross, I enrolled in Fordham as a PhD candidate, but I found that college academia was not a good fit for me. So after my master's degree, I took a job at Loyola School in Manhattan, a 4-year Jesuit high school, and this made sense to me. My BA in a Jesuit school, my master's at a Jesuit school, and a teaching job at a Jesuit school. As we imagine our career paths, it's hard to know, impossible to know, how the twists and turns, both good and bad, take what we imagine to be straight, predictable lines and fill them with deviations and inflections. And sometimes these can feel like landmines, but often they're incredible opportunities. So how do we prepare ourselves for the risk that's involved in seizing these opportunities? My own nonlinear path led to a couple of unexpected moves when I got married. My husband's job took us first to West Virginia and then a few years later to Maine. Now let me insert here my lifelong love of hospitality, all things hospitality, hotels, restaurants, resorts, inns, anything food and beverage. When I was about 10 years old, I started riding my bicycle down the road from my house just to look at the Silver Mine Tavern, a riverside inn that was down the street from where I grew up. I loved looking at it, the cool, dark interior, the planked floors, the low ceilings, the incredible deck off the back that spanned out over the river and had tables and chairs among the trees that were strung with white lights. I also loved when my mother would take me to tea at the different hotels in New York City. I loved the soft hush of the thick carpeted lobbies and the sophistication of the employees who seemed to glide instead of walk. I had also started cooking at a very young age for my parents and my older siblings, and I had continued to do so throughout my life, both for family and friends. So back to West Virginia. I found myself living down the road from one of America's oldest and grandest resorts, the Greenbrier. And they had an amazing 3-year apprenticeship program for aspiring chefs. And so I met with the executive chef to talk about my candidacy. And he asked me a bunch of questions. The first one was, how would you feel about carving up an animal in a freezer at 3 o'clock in the morning? How would you feel about learning how to create a massive ice sculpture? Do you want to work 80-hour weeks? most of them evenings, weekends, and holidays. I had just gotten married. My husband had a more traditional Monday through Friday job, and I had little interest in being a chef at a major resort or hotel. So was the apprenticeship a risk worth taking? My no column, my cons column, was adding up pretty quickly. But I loved the Greenbrier. So I ended up working there, honing my hospitality skills in both guest and employee relations, skills that would come in handy in a few years for the risk that I didn't know I was going to take. So zig and zag, we left Maine, we left West Virginia, moved to Maine. We had 2 children, and I was sort of in nesting mode, but I was kind of antsy to flex my culinary muscle. So I licensed my home kitchen, and I tried to drum up some catering business. One of my first gigs was making hundreds of sandwiches that got put into coolers for people who came from all over the world to work with a local dog trainer. I did corporate lunches for a major construction company who happens to have their home base in Maine. I catered holiday cocktail parties and bar mitzvahs. Somehow I ended up specializing in wedding cakes. And there was one night, it was about 2 a.m., everybody was sleeping upstairs, and I was rolling out cake fondant, trying to match the exact teal color of the bridesmaid's dress. And I thought, you know, something needs to change here. I think I might need to pivot. And that's when I found what was then called the Brunswick Inn on Park Row, a 16-room bed and breakfast right next to Bowdoin College. Now, I'm not a fan of bed and breakfasts, but I thought, well, I can redecorate, I can open it to the public, at a restaurant, rebrand it as a boutique inn, and call it a day. So for me, the inn was and is my more. It wasn't about ambition. I knew this was not going to bring me wealth or prestige. I just wanted to build something amazing for people. I knew I could create a space of welcome, comfort, and nourishment, not just with beautiful rooms and delicious food, but with kindness and attentiveness. And these were all wonderful ideas, but I had almost no experience. So I sought advice from family members, friends, real estate experts, accountants, attorneys, my cousin, who is a graduate of the Cornell Hotel School and teaches hospitality at NYU. And many of these advisors tried to talk me out of it. In fact, my husband was really the only one who was behind me 100%. One person told me he didn't really see me as an entrepreneur. One person told me she was afraid I was going to buy it, hate it, and not be able to sell it. Quite a few told me that 2008 was not the time to be buying real estate. I prayed for guidance, but mostly I think I just wanted someone to give me a book, a manual, and say, if you look on this page, you're going to find the answer to your question. And it wasn't a yes-no question. It wasn't a right-wrong question. Now, I was the only one who could make the decision. But Holy Cross made me feel comfortable in the gray space that exists between those dichotomies. There's the why, the how, the what if. How was I going to figure out how to run a business? What kind of a leader would I be? What if I fail? Why do I want to do this in the first place? Why do I need to do it? For me, as I'm sure it is for you, Holy Cross was a 4-year experience in a culture that encouraged and even demanded that we ask these questions. There were classroom debates about the meaning of a poem. There was the probing search for meaning and context in Helen Wall's Shakespeare class. There was the analysis of the globalization of food supply in a class on the politics of hunger. And there was also the more satisfyingly concrete knowledge that when you're constructing an argument, one piece of really solid evidence can trump 100 shakier ones. And so with that knowledge and my own conviction and the support of my husband, I decided that I would take the risk and that it outweighed the naysayers. Now, that's not to say that once I made the decision, I was sure or that it was easy. But Jesuit discernment isn't about being sure. It's not about having certainty. It's about trusting that we're supported in our questions, in our doubts, in our fears. And it reminds us that even if we choose imperfectly, there is grace in trying. So my move wasn't always pretty. There were a lot of sleepless nights worrying about finances, trying to figure out how to deal with crazy employees, a leaking roof, and then, of course, the pandemic. Bowdoin College was my no risk, can't fail insurance policy. And I would tell people, well, Bowdoin College isn't going anywhere. I'll always have those rooms. And they called and said, we're closing. All right, so I was afraid I was going to lose the whole business. So stop, evaluate, analyze, think outside the box, be creative. There are so many ways our liberal arts education prepares us to do these things. One specific example from my time here on the Hill was a class called Exercise Physiology. I have PTSD, I think. I needed a class to fulfill a requirement, and I was in so far over my head. I was so lost. Give me a novel. Give me a poem. Do not give me chemistry. Do not give me biology. It was exercising part of my brain that I didn't even know existed. And I had to figure it out. So I got a tutor. I figured out a whole new way of reading a text, a whole new way of studying. And I was humbled in the end with a passing but not very pretty grade. The pandemic wasn't pretty either, but I figured that out. Over the course of COVID, I housed about 30 Bowdoin College students. They were not able to stay in the dorms, and I created a meal plan for them and allowed them to go to college altogether rather than from their basement in Miami or their bedroom in Michigan. I was a quarantine haven for locals, including meal service, room service, and including for our US Senator. So that was exciting. I didn't lose my business, and I did not lay off any employees. So we were almost through COVID when we suffered a fire. That closed us down for 13 months, and this was a tough one. Suddenly, this English major was leading a major construction project. How would I get through this? I was very conscious of my children watching me. They were in high school at the time. How was I responding to this curveball, this knee-buckling shock? And my staff was also looking to me for cues. They needed to be cheered up. They needed to be assured. And maybe most difficult of all was I was trying to find my way to forgive the young woman who inadvertently started the fire. I needed to be a leader for my staff, a role model for my children when all I wanted to do was crawl under the covers. The aftermath of the fire took a strength and resilience I didn't even know I had. But I tried to follow the advice I give my kids all the time. Take one step at a time, one day at a time. Ask for help. Pray for courage. And remember how resilient you are. Buying the Brunswick Inn and its consequent rebranding post-fire as OneSixtyFive was one of the biggest risks I've ever taken. It changed the course of my life. It tested every part of me. And it gave me a mission that I never expected, and a joy that I never expected. I have witnessed deep down what I think I've known all my life. A welcoming space, a great meal, maybe a roaring fire or a shady front porch, and the kindness of the people who provide these things, they can make someone's day. They can turn a sour mood into a good one, a good mood into a great one. They can make difficult moments a little bit easier, and they can make celebrations even more special. I took the risk not because I had all the answers, but because I was willing to ask the questions. If I thought I had had all the answers, I would have failed spectacularly. So ask yourself what your more is, and know that your Jesuit education has prepared you for where that more will take you. You have the power of discernment when you're lost. You have cura personalis when you're at your wit's end. You have magis when you're tempted to settle. And you have the incredible grace of knowing that you're not alone. I encourage you, don't wait until you feel 100% ready or 100% sure. Don't let the fear of failure cancel out the possibility of growth. And don't underestimate how much good can come from one courageous yes. Thank you.